Good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht. I'm the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. We're here to talk, and this is the Technical Advisory Committee meeting on July 9th, 2025. We're going to get this meeting underway. I'll go over the agenda first, but let me share my slides. All right, can you guys see that screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk, this is a public meeting, has been publicly noticed. We will talk about ground rules for public participation. We will do an update on the TAC appointments. And then the meat of the meeting today will be a deep dive into Senate Bill 25-002, and that will lay out the work that we have ahead of us. We'll talk about a couple of non-002 administrative changes. And then we'll look into, if we have a little bit of time, the overview of building codes and standards, because we still have some new TAC members here. And then there is also a resource slide that I shared and will be part of the recording and will be up on the website for other folks that are interested and the TAC members that are interested. And then we'll talk about next steps. So public members, welcome. We appreciate having you here, and we appreciate you having input in the rulemaking process. We recommend that you type questions in the chat or raise your hand. I have two co-hosts for this meeting, Michelle Goulet and Donnie Featherman, who will be looking for hands that are raised and stop me, and we'll call on you if you have questions or comments. Of course, this is a TAC meeting, and we do have business to get through, so priority will be given to the TAC members. If you're observing and want to send in comments, we welcome email comments. Those can be sent to me at sam.albrecht@state.co.us. Michelle, if you could put that email in the chat for me, that'd be fantastic.
Got it.
So updates on TAC appointments. We've got two new members of the TAC. One is Climate Zone 6, Sam Samuelson with Telluride. Now we're going to have two Sams on this meeting. So we're going to have to make sure that we identify which Sam we're talking to. But I think Sam and I have figured it out amongst ourselves. So just ping us and we'll get it all sorted out. Welcome, Sam. Also, Climate Zone 7, building official is going to be Don Banham with Summit County. And Don, welcome to the Technical Advisory Committee.
Hey, Sam, do you mind if Sam and Don provide some background and context about their current roles and background and experience?
Sam, why don't you go first?
Thank you. I'm the currently building official for the town of Telluride. Have been for 26 years. Before that, I was in the building official and whatnot in the Bay Area of California, a town called Mountain View City, actually. And my family and all moved 26 years ago. I have 5 grandchildren. I'm sure I'm the oldest one on this group. Still working because I enjoy it, and I've been involved with what our group deals with. So I thought I would volunteer and help out as I can. Does anybody have any questions? Or
Thank you, Sam. Don, you want to go up? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Don Banham with Summit County Housing Department. I'm the Housing Department building official right now. I started at the Summit County Building Department in 1999, 24 years. It's a combination inspector, mechanical, plumbing, building plans examiner, deputy building official, and building official was my last role there. 2 years ago, I jumped over to the housing department, and I'm their building official, building affordable housing and maintaining and working on properties that we own here. Live here in Summit County, living the dream.
Living the dream. That's what we are trying to do, Don. Thank you. And we have had one other replacement to the TAC already, and that is Patrick Howell's replacing Laura Varnell. Patrick, I think you're online. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Sam. So good morning, everybody. Patrick Howell. I am the Disaster Housing Recovery Program Manager within the Division of Housing at DOLA with the state. Today is day 2, so it's really good to be joining you all here. Just, real quickly on my background, most recently, I'm coming from a nonprofit organization called Institute for Building Technology and Safety, where we're really focused on kind of the nexus of building codes and building standards as it relates to natural hazards and climate risks. So moving into the position on the TAC to represent climate resiliency, really looking forward to learning from each one of you and contributing to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. And we'll add that to the slide deck before we post it. So here's the deep dive part of Senate Bill 25002, the regional building codes for factory built structures. We wanted to try to divide it in a way that made sense, and the way we decided to do that is the effective date of different parts of the Senate bill, right? So what we have here is 4 different sections. Effective May 8th, which was the date of the signing of the bill and does not require rulemaking. Effective May 8th and requires rulemaking. And effective by July 1 and requires rulemaking. That July 1 date is also, and I'll talk about it again, but that is the effective date that we want our regional building codes to be completed. And then also the last one, there is some language in the bill that parts of the bill and statute will be modified when a notice specifying the effective date is sent after the adoption of the rules to the reviser of statutes. So we will work those into the timeline as we move forward. So 002 effective May 8th and does not require rulemaking. Let me go back to slideshow on this. Can you guys see that, or did I lose everybody?
No, see it.
We can see it,
Got
but
it?
you're showing your whole screen.
All right, let me make sure I've got this right. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. So let me go back one slide and just talk about those 2. I accidentally clicked on another tab and I think I lost the focus. So effective May 8th and does not require rulemaking. We talked about that. Effective May 8th and requires rulemaking. Effective by July 1st, 2026 and requires rulemaking. And then effective when a notice specifying its effective date is sent after adoption of the rules to the reviser of statutes. So effective May 8th and does not require rulemaking. That is the amendment to the electrical and plumbing laws regulated by DORA. Now, I don't know if DORA has to do rulemaking on that or not. We have seen notices already come out from DORA with some of the implementation details on that. This basically says that part of the statute says that DORA does not have jurisdiction over the completion of the construction or installation of factory built structures, and that their jurisdiction is limited to the connections to external utility sources that are not considered part of the installation, and that gas piping installation on the service side must be completed by a qualified gas piping installer. So this is kind of the way that we were operating beforehand. This just clarifies and cleans up some of the responsible parties for doing different parts of the connection to the utilities.
Sam, can I ask a question? Or should I put it in chat, or how would you like us to do this?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Just curious, trying to understand the second bullet point. Jurisdiction is limited to connections to external utilities that are not considered part of its installation. What does that mean?
So if the unit is being installed, it's the Hi, Mike. If the unit is being installed, then DORA is responsible for the connections to the unit after the installation is complete.
Does that mean that the factory can do utility connections at the site under its scope of work?
Yes, if it's part of the installation of the unit, then the manufacturer can do that.
Perfect. So, okay, sorry to clarify, but so I could have my own electricians connect the utilities box to box and to the main service.
Inside the shell of that unit, right?
You cannot connect to the external utility sources. You
Yeah.
cannot do that.
Okay.
So everything leading up to that, yes, would fall under a program. So anything short of the connection to the actual utility source is under our program.
Okay.
That connection and anything else is DORA.
Okay, so box to box connections are within the box, so that's factory scope.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that first big bullet? Tim?
Yeah, thank you. So just for clarification, the way I understand it and what that bullet point 2 would be is that the exterior connections would be taken care of by the local jurisdiction's permitting process, or if they didn't have a jurisdiction, then it would be the state electrical plumbing inspectors. Is that for clarification, that would be correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's the stuff that's coming from outside the unit into the unit. That would still be locals, and the state is applicable.
And would include the fire sprinkler connection if there was a required fire sprinkler.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then that takes us to that fire suppression system, and that is basically that the Department of Fire Prevention and Control does not have jurisdiction over completion of the construction or installation of the factory built structures, but they can still be involved in, and we're talking with them about how best to make that work for what you were just talking about, Tim, and that is the connection to the utilities for sprinkler systems. Any questions, other questions on this slide? Okay, the next slide on this. Effective May 8th, and we're still on effective May 8th, and does not require rulemaking, and that is that any future statewide adopted codes and statute must first be vetted by the TAC and the State Housing Board. So we're expecting that to be a fairly easy process. If you see in your day jobs others statewide adopted codes that affect factory built structures, please let us know. We will be getting out the word to our others adopters of statewide building codes of the process to notify and who to notify and how to do that.
This is Michelle. Let me just pop in here. Dominic, you put a question in the chat. Where is the connection to plumbing located? So this goes back to the previous slides or page 6. Where is the connection to plumbing located, inside or outside of the structure?
Thank you, John. So I don't know that I have the answer to that. Donnie or Mo, do you get Donnie? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the connection of the plumbing utility is where the building drain connects to the building sewer. So typically the locals are within 5 feet of the foundation system, but depending on where the plumbing system or where the building drain system goes to a single connection for the building sewer is where we count the connection point. So if you have a bathroom group and a kitchen group that go into one connection point, and then anything beyond or anything downstream of that connection to the building drain would be the starting point of the local jurisdiction.
John, does that help answer your question?
Well, so plumbing code, our jurisdiction stops at 5 feet outside the structure. Connection from building drain to building sewer is defined as 30 inches outside of the structure.
Okay.
So if what I'm understanding Donnie says, our jurisdiction would start at the 30 inches outside of the structure.
So the completion of the unit's plumbing system is where they all connect to one connection point.
Okay.
Okay. So anything beyond that, if it's in a crawl space or a basement, that'd be anything beyond that point would be local jurisdiction. If that typically it's going to be on the inside of that unit,
Okay.
or at least inside that that footprint of that building.
Okay.
Okay, because anything beyond that is not required to have a complete plumbing system for the home itself or the building itself, right? We'll probably have to get into that discussion a little bit further when we start developing these regional building codes, because there's going to be some areas where we have to clarify where that connection point's at, just because of the current language that's in the Colorado Plumbing Code, and then also IPC and IRC plumbing connection requirements.
So, okay. Well, like I said, just and then just one offhand question: who's going to do the inspections on all the connections underneath the for all those connections to that location?
So anything that needs to be completed on site to complete the plumbing system of the structure will be under the OC process, the on-site construction process. And then anything beyond that point of where the systems connect to one drain connection point would be locals.
Okay. So if the plumbing board is in other words, we do 37 counties that we're the inspection entity for that. So are we considered the local jurisdiction when we're doing the inspections in those locations then?
Yeah, so automatically anything beyond that connection point for beyond the structure's plumbing system is going to be you guys, right? In DORA. But for the OC, the on-site construction process, if that needs to be done on site, the local jurisdiction, in this case, if it's you, if you sign that form, you have the jurisdiction over that installation of that product, with the understanding that it needs to be done per our approved requirements.
Okay, so that'll be something you'll have to approach our management with as to whether or not they'll sign that form.
Okay, and is that
otherwise there wouldn't be any inspections? So, like I
yeah,
said, so that's going to be something to address.
Yeah, so one thing that we've done in the past is if there was a local building department there, but they didn't have a plumbing or electrical inspector, and they used DORA, and they wanted to sign the form for the other items, other than the plumbing and electrical, we had them coordinate with DORA to look at the remaining items for the plumbing and electrical. So at the end of that process, they just get confirmation from your inspectors that that portion is completed, and then they'll sign the final form stating that all portions of the structure for the OC process has been inspected and passed.
And so if there's no local building departments, then that'll have to be some type of an agreement there then, right?
Yeah, so if it really what we try to do is make it an all or nothing, just so we can keep one inspection record of everything. But if the DORA decides that they would not like to look at those items, then they would be deferred to us or a third-party agency, depending on if the manufacturer wants to hire a third-party agency or do the inspection process through the Division of Housing.
Nope.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Tim?
And I don't have a raise my hand, so I apologize. I don't know where it's at, but it's not on here.
No, you're fine, John.
Okay, thank you. And for additional clarification, I think it's going to be important for another situation that we've seen is not just having the unit moved in on a crawl space and how the various plumbing drops come down or water lines, but if you have a full basement as part of the unit contract with a full basement, and how you drop down to get your plumbing down through under slab in the basement, or even including an on-site basement finish in terms of how to clarification where that break is between the state or DOLA and local jurisdictions. So I don't need to go into details today, but I think we really need to clarify those when we go to the rules for the builders and the locals. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I agree. Mo?
I wasn't raising my hand. That was a thumbs up agreeing with Tim.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So for all of you who don't know, if you go to the React option at your toolbar at the bottom, you have all sorts of fun little things you can utilize to support what somebody said. You can even laugh at what somebody said. Hopefully nobody will do that. But the most important option is the raise hand option at the bottom. Thanks.
Thank you, Mo.
Oh, and real quick, Sam, since I was talking, Dean Dalbert has a question in the chat.
And a building with both, Dean, go ahead and give us your question.
Yeah, it's kind of a riff on what was just mentioned in terms of having to get more clarity as we go through this process. But most buildings we design are actually hybrid buildings where whether it's a house or a multifamily project, the house might have a below grade basement or an above grade basement, or below module garages or things like that. And then the larger scale up, a full podium building, this demarcation of where the modules end and where the local jurisdiction begins under the new paradigm is going to be of pretty critical importance.
Yep. I agree with you. So right now within the building, it's going to be within the building codes and standards responsibility to make sure that is done. Again, if we're talking outside of the building, then it's going to be the locals and or the state.
Right. And that, I think it raises the question of, so a hybrid project that is part modular and part stick framed or on-site constructed, the term in the building would mean that technically any plumbing that's in the building, even if it's in a ground floor commercial podium of a multi-story modular project, would in fact be governed by the state at this point. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, Dean, that is correct. And by state, I assume you mean DOLA, Department of
Yes.
Local Affairs.
Exactly.
Not DORA, for example, which is also a state agency. But yes, you are spot on. That would all fit under the OC process, the on-site completion process that Donnie referenced earlier. And so it would be under the authority of DOLA. But of course, we would be working in partnership with local governments who are interested in inspecting on our behalf, or of course, DORA inspecting on our behalf as well. Gotcha.
So has there been any question that has come up in that respect where what if somebody does a project that's 40% modules and 60% on-site construction, or that enterprising developer that just buys one module to call it a modular project and not have to deal with the local inspectors in his jurisdiction.
Well, there has to be a structure that we certify ultimately, right?
Right.
If it's just, and we're gonna have to have a conversation about that. If it's just deemed to be just a component, which we have that ability to certify on its own, then I would say no. It would
Gotcha.
not fall under our program. But if the overall structure is deemed to be modular, even though a good percentage of it is going to be a site completion, then the answer would be yes. So I don't know what the percentage point would be or what the tipping point would be to distinguish the two. It's probably something we're going to have to get a little bit more granular on to provide some clarity on.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, as long as there's a
Good
framework
question.
for that. Otherwise, it becomes a real murky zone, and people will try to game it for sure.
Correct, and we don't want that. We don't want to. We definitely do not want that.
Exactly.
Yeah, but more to follow on that. That's a good question. Great flag.
Dean, I made a note to work out hybrid stuff as we go through the rulemaking. And for this one, we're talking about things right now that don't require rulemaking. So we may be able to clarify that in policies and procedures between the agencies.
John has his hand up.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just have discussions on whether basements are required for manufactured homes or not. Is that what we're talking about? So like I said, they can do them on you're more interested in the foundation setting for a manufactured home, or is that going to encompass, like I said, the basement plumbing once they decide to do a basement, even though it's not required for your manufactured home? So I'm kind of a little bit in the dark on that. Plus, my understanding is, you're not going to require licensed plumbers, licensed and registered plumbing contractors to do any of that work within the structure, right?
Correct. So the basement question, we look at it from the foundation type, right? If it's a HUD code manufactured home, it can go on a temporary or a permanent foundation, right? With the modular units, they are required to go on a permanent foundation. Now, whether or not that requires a basement or a slab on a crawl space, that's the jurisdiction of the locals, or in the areas of the state that don't have a building department, that'll be approval of the building codes and standards on that foundation type, where we do have authority in for the foundations in areas of the state that don't have a building department for factory built structures. And just to be completely clear, on-site construction of apartments, multifamily units, and hotels in areas of the state that do not have a building department are managed by building codes and standards also, whether it's factory built or on-site built.
So John, the simple answer to your question is it depends if there's a building department. If there's a building department, the foundation system is under their jurisdiction. If there is not a building department, then it's DOLA.
Okay, so John, I think were you trying to ask a follow-up?
No, well, my phone on my computer went off, so I was shutting it down. So I got drowned out by that. Unfortunately,
Mo, you want to repeat?
High tech, our phones come over a computer too. So yeah. So I guess it's just the discussion.
What I was saying, John, what I was saying is the simple response is if there's a building department, then it has jurisdiction over the foundation. If there is not a building department, then it's DOLA for factory built structures and HUD code homes. But it also extends to any on-site constructed hotel, motel, or multifamily structure as well in jurisdictions that do not have a building department.
Right. Yeah, and we've done inspections like out at the golf course out by Holyoke. that was under you guys' jurisdiction. We've done all the inspections on those multi-unit overnight stays there for that. But yeah, just like I said, yeah, and we required plumbing contractors, to do that work. Is that so? Since it's on your jurisdiction, I know you don't require plumbing contractors to do, or licensed plumbers to do installations on factory built structures, right?
Correct.
So does that translate? Is that going to translate over to those types of projects, or to like I say, a basement that has all the plumbing in the basement, but the only connections for the manufacturer are really just the stuff above that's coming from the manufacturer? Are you following me now? Where I'm going?
I do, John. That's an excellent question. We'll have to discuss further.
So
Yeah,
just
so
wanted to bring that
if
up
it's not part of the modular structure itself, the completion of it, but it's under our jurisdiction, are we going to be requiring licensed folks to do that work? That's a great question. We'll have to revisit that and get back to you.
Okay. Alrighty. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So we're on the slide that says continued. We talked about other future statewide adopted codes will be vetted by TAC and State Housing Board. Amendments to local government statutes is the next main bullet here. This is for both counties and municipalities. They have their own sections in the Colorado Revised Statute. It is basically saying that local governments cannot take action that will exclude any factory built structures or HUD code manufactured homes. And an important clarification on that's not on the slide is that we do know that there are jurisdictions that don't allow pre-HUD code homes. And the way that we read this is that it would just be the newer HUD code homes, right? And that local governments may not impose more restrictive standards on factory built structures than those applied to site built, including home size, sectional requirements, improvement location, minimum floor space, permanent foundation, setback standards, or side yard standards. And so I had a question yesterday from somebody on whether they could require aesthetic building materials to, for example, an accessory dwelling unit be required to aesthetically match the primary unit. To me, that's not in this code. It would be the same for site built. All we're trying to do, one of the big goals of this legislation is to make sure we have a level playing field with on-site versus factory built. So if you do something for all on-site built structures and factory built structures, minus these exemptions here, that is probably okay. So the perfect example was that aesthetic material. If you require a stone facade up, 30 inches on the bottom of an on-site built structure, and a factory built structure, to me, that does not violate this. Part of the statute change. Dean?
Yeah, so on that note, we've worked on modular projects in jurisdictions that actually have in their zoning regulation modular as a use by right for certain zoning districts and not a use by right for others. So does this effectively make that illegal for those jurisdictions to regulate their uses by way of modularity?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Dean, I would refer to that second part of it. What's important to note here, though, that and I think Sam touched upon it, and I'm sure Sean Roos would be interested in this. The first part, it's important to note that it applies to both factory-built structures or HUD code manufactured homes, and that was language that already existed in the statute. I can't remember which bill modified it. It might have been a tiny homes bill. And that basically said that local governments may not take an action that will exclude it. but didn't go into any specificity. The second part, though, is something new that was introduced through this bill, Senate Bill 2. And it's important to note that it only applies to factory built structures. So it does not apply to HUD code manufactured homes. So they would not have the same protection here that you would see for a factory built structure. But what it basically says is if they're going to allow zoning for a similar product that's site built, right? They have to do the same thing if it's factory built.
We have heard that some of the jurisdictions from last year's ADU bill are allowing HUD code homes to be an alternative for the ADU requirement too. So that is another piece of information. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't going to comment on what you just said, Sam, but I just had attended our first reading with our city council, which we just modified zoning regs to allow the HUD and tiny homes to be used as ADUs. So we were successful on the first reading last night. My main comment why I raised my hand was we talked a little bit on the aesthetics when I asked you that question several days ago with the new language here. But in terms of the new WUI code, Wildland Urban Interface Code, that is in place and needing to be adopted by all jurisdictions, including this group, and what the potential of that may be with the way this bill reads, because I know it talks about the bullet number 1 has to be vetted by the TAC and the State Housing Board, but in terms of just aesthetic finishes, I don't have that answer, but I know that that's going to be part, I'm sure, a discussion as we get into the weeds of everything. But I just want to bring that to the forefront. Thanks.
Tim, thank you for that. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. This statute went in effect May 8th, right? And for certain parts of it. And the WUI code went into effect on the 1st of July, I believe. So I am going to touch base on the WUI code in just a little bit. I think one of the things that we are looking at doing is adopting a section of that WUI code to deal with the structure itself, not the defensible space, not the other requirements that are built into that. I think it's section 4 of the state WUI code that talks about structure hardening. So if the locals are going to require, if you're inside the WUI fire zone map and you are requiring fire hardening for your structures, we think it's that it will apply to the factory built structures also. Does that make sense? But I think that's 10 or 15 slides down the pack. All right, and then I just wanted to briefly, any other questions on the local government requirements here? I'm happy. There are statutory, if you read Senate Bill 25-002, it gives you the actual title and section of the statute that is being changed to that. The red line version of the statute on the website is the best place to see that, how it was changed. And then if you read the complete statute by itself, if you just go to the Colorado Revised Statute, it's all been updated because it was an effective date of May 8th. If you have any questions about these two pieces and you want me to give you the statute references, please let me know. But you can find it in Senate Bill 25-002. Talk a little bit about the changes to the TAC composition. Again, that was from 15 to 19. I am not going to read all this, but it is there for your reference. And if you want to know how it changed from 15 to 19, there were additions, changes, subtractions, but an overall expansion. We added another building code official to this. We clarified 3 factory built or manufacturer representatives on this. still kept plumbing, we still kept electrical, still kept structural. We added a developer. But again, I didn't want to go through and read all this, but it's a 2-page, slides 8 and 9, I think. We decreased tiny home representation from 2 to 1. And again, you heard Patrick earlier, there's a climate resiliency position. We have now a registered installer, and we're looking for talking to folks about the emergency services and management position. And we kept energy conservation. Any questions on the makeup of the TAC? Okay. Effective May 8th and requires rulemaking. This is the installer portion that was added to the bill as an amendment. This allows the business entity to perform an installation as a registered installer in addition to a person. As you may know, for our registered installer program, registered certified installers, could only be individually named. What we wanted to clarify with this, and we'll do this in rulemaking, and Donnie and I are going to work up some draft language, and we'll work with Matt Mitchell. He's our installer rep on the TAC, is that now businesses can have more than one installer. And there was questions in the past on whether or not they could do that, whether they could be covered with their bonding and their proof of insurance. But we're going to allow that now. It's very clear in statute that we are, and we'll update some rules to allow that coverage under a business entity. And it just makes sense as we see the increase in building and homes. An installer may want to have more than one. A business may want to have more than one installer. This does not. We will not back off of the requirement. The installer must be the installer of record and on site during the installation of the units. They will still have to require that. And I don't think we're going to look at letting them swap off from installer A halfway to installer B. We want one installer to watch that entire installation, but we can discuss that in the when we propose that rule to you guys very, very soon. Mo?
Yeah, I would not say anything definitive on that yet, Sam. I think that definitely needs to be discussed in more detail before a decision is made. I'm glad you mentioned Matt. Is Matt on here? The other thing I wanted Matt to discuss here is something he had raised as an issue and concern that's not related to the bill implementation, but since we're going to be tackling the installer registration requirements because of the change to the bill, we might as well tackle it at the same time. Is an issue Matt had raised about the requirements for an entity or individual to have in order to inspect multifamily installations. So Matt, if you are on, if you could provide a summary of those concerns for everybody, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And Matt's not on, Donnie.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am on. And thanks. But yeah, I mean, the way that we see that is that the entity, the business is the overall business, but they could have multiple installers, and those installers still have to have the training and the knowledge. It's run through the business versus each individual having to carry the insurance and requirements. So if for example, I have an installation company and we're working on multiple jobs at the same time, whoever is on each one of those job sites has to have the proper training and the CEUs to be on that job site, but it all would fall under the same bond and of the business itself.
Yep. And Mo, you're right. I think we need to have that discussion on, especially in the multifamily installations. You know, if it's a two or 3 week installation process, can we allow multiple installers from the same company to shift gears. We'll have that discussion. Tawny?
Well, more importantly, Sam, not more importantly, but equally importantly, like how do we successfully inspect the installations that are done? So there's the who's authorized to perform the installations, right? And then there's who's authorized to inspect the installations, especially to your point, those multi-week installations, right? We're not going to have the resources to have somebody out there inspecting it. So we have to really utilize local governments and third parties to do that. So we have to come up with a framework that works more effectively. And based on some of the feedback I've gotten from Matt, that's not working as well as we had thought it would.
Yep. Thank you. Tawny?
I just wanted to also add, the unfortunate situation where there's, been the licensed installer has passed away, and just having someone who's able to complete their installations and to continue operating under that business license.
Right. Thank you. That's a good point. And we have had that happen. Any other questions about this? All right, great. So now here's the big part, and that is effective July 1st of 26 and requires rulemaking. There's 3 slides on this. So the regional building codes and fire protection and suppression activities, the standards should include at a minimum wind shear, snow load, wildfire risk, thermal zone, radon mitigation, or automatic fire sprinkler system requirements. That's what we're going to be working on primarily. And then there was also a note in the, not a note, but there was also a couple of lines in the bill that says factory built structures certified prior to new regional building code requirements are subject to other agent requirements that have jurisdiction. So that is just a clarification if there's any questions about prior certified units. And then, so with respect to the regional building codes, as I mentioned last time, we're going to have a project manager on board soon, I hope. We're also looking at hiring some code consulting company to help us work through what that looks like. And what our goal is 10 or less, and preferably less, regional codes for the manufacturers. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. And with that bullet point on the previously certified ones, I think it would be prudent for the group to come up with clarification on how you would deal with an addition, adding like a new unit that has to fall under the new regional building codes and attach it to an existing one, maybe a stacked unit or side by side. So just for clarification, for discussion, I think we need to get some details of that potential. Thanks.
Yep, and the rules are the perfect place to do that. I'd love to hear input from any of the other TAC members on any concerns they have with that for factory built structures that are prior certified. So if you want to send those to me by email, that'd be great.
Sam, just quick question.
Yep.
What does it mean? I mean, I guess I don't know what a factory built structure certified prior to the new regional building code. What would that be? Would that be a structure that we've built that's sitting in storage and it hasn't been set yet, or what does this mean?
That's a really good question, Charlie. I am not sure how I've worked all that out in my head yet. Mo, you've got thoughts on that?
Yeah, unless I misunderstood Tim, I think what Tim was saying is, Charlie, if you had built a structure under the current requirements and it was set, installed, certified, right? And then now a new structure is built under the new requirements and it's being attached to the old structure that was built to different requirements, what then? So that's what Tim had raised, and that's an interesting observation that we need to discuss further.
Gotcha.
Dean?
Yeah, on that note, I mean, we've certainly been involved in projects that are repurposing modules that were previously built for other projects that went AWOL, and I think the concept is always out there that, you know, any modular building could effectively be deconstructed and repurposed in the future. So I think that is a loose end that this might need to contemplate. You know, the possibility of future reuse of modules that were built in any prior era. On a design perspective, it's not all that difficult for us because it's basically just a list of design criteria that went into the design of the module. But when it comes to permitting, that's a whole nother animal.
Okay, thank you, Dean. The next main bullet on this one is that requirements for local government inspections, as this bill moved through the committees and the legislators, it was very clear that we want to continue to work with our local government partners. This helps clarify that. We will be looking for other opportunities for them to do inspections on behalf of the department, just as we mentioned, multifamily units where you've got stuff that may need inspected every day. It's hard for me to send with 4 inspectors to pull out 25% of my workforce and send them to a location on the other side of the state for 2 weeks. It just impacts everything. So we're hoping that there is opportunities to expand our participation with the local governments. Any questions on this? Other questions on this slide? Okay. Registration, responsibility, and accounting requirements for manufacturer, installation seller, or general contractor, including education, training, and certification opportunities. So this is was added to make sure to help us kind of work out some of the logistics. For a while, we've had a rule where we have required GCs, local governments, the developer, the manufacturer, and the installer to all have a meeting prior to the start of once the project kicks off, so that we all know who the responsible parties are. This drives down into that a little bit more. There is a part of the statutes where that a building contractor, the GC, is not required to be registered or certified by our program when conducting business in a jurisdiction with an established licensing program. That is to try to, there was a concern that we would be registering all GCs, and that's not the intent of the program to do that. This also expands on the education and training about factory-built structures, and we will look at solutions to do that, possibly an online learning system that will provide basic backgrounds on factory-built structures and developing sites for factory-built structures. Mo?
Yeah, I can't overemphasize the importance of this piece in the statute. And I saw Mike Morrow on here, and I'm sure Mike Morrow's got some thoughts on this. For years, we've been grappling with the issue of the statutory construct of this program, where there are only 3 individuals and entities that are regulated by this program, and that was the manufacturer, the installer, and the seller, right? And the questions always arose, but at the end of the day, we're certifying a complete structure, not pieces of a structure, right? And so who is ultimately responsible for the completion of that structure, right? And sometimes the manufacturer is like, well, I'm not completing it, I'm sending out these boxes, right? And then the installer is like, well, I'm doing the installation. I'm being asked to do more. I don't feel comfortable doing it, but I'm being asked to do more. And then sometimes the seller, which has the most limited requirements in statute, ends up doing more outside of selling and actually finishing this product, right? But we can't go after them if they do something wrong on finishing the product. So we end up in situations where something is not done right to complete the structure, and we got a bunch of finger pointing, right? And because the way the statute is set up, most of it falls on the manufacturer, and sometimes that is not the best place for it to fall. Usually, it is a general contractor that's been pulled in, but we don't have any oversight over that general contractor. If we're lucky, there's a local building department that does, and we can coordinate with them, and they can provide some pressure to get that work done right, right? Well, this provides some greater clarity that we can weigh in on that. So if a seller is doing more to complete his structure, right, then we could have requirements for that seller. If an installer is doing more above and beyond what's required for installation, we can engage there. If a manufacturer is doing more than just completing the structures in a plant and sending them out, then we can engage in there. And then last but not least, if there's somebody else, that fourth party, that general contractor that is doing that work, then we can engage there as well. So this is huge. This is going to require some serious discussion and coordination. And I saw Don had his hand up. Don will be instrumental in this part of it because he's actually dealt on the regulatory side of things where he's watched this kind of become a problem, right? And has had to step in and get it back on track. Well, this is an opportunity now for DOLA to do so with feedback from everybody and how best to do that. And of course, the complication is that building contractor language at the end that was introduced at the end of the session. We got to figure out, the intent is really good. Obviously, you don't want to double regulate anybody, right? Just like in a registered installer through our program shouldn't be regulated by local jurisdiction to do that same work, right? In the same sense, a building contractor is already regulated by that jurisdiction to do contract work, shouldn't be regulated by us. But we're gonna have to figure out how that works in jurisdictions that don't have that, right? And then of course, the bill still requires education for that building contractor or general contractor, that even if they may be registered by that local government, they still have to understand the modular product, right? And we have ability to provide education and outreach on that through the building department as well. So there's a lot going on here in this on the slide. It's crucial for making these projects work better in the future.
Thank you, Mo. Don?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Mo said. Two concerns is jurisdictions that don't have building departments, or jurisdictions that have had enough political pressure that don't allow their building departments to test and license contractors, maybe like Summit County that just registers them. And so I think that's the biggest concern, is seeing the people that come in that don't do it properly, give modular construction a bad name. And I think Mo hit it right on the head. Is this is a big discussion of how does this group turn that around, and make sure that the general contractors putting these modulars together actually know what they're doing. I think that's probably the biggest concern that I have of what I've seen over 24 years in Summit County. And these are the people that are giving modular construction a really bad name. So I agree with Mo. This needs a lot of discussion. So
Thank you, Don. Any other comments on this one? All right. So the third of the slides talks about third-party plan approval for manufacturers. We know the manufacturers have approved that, have requested that for quite a while. Right now, as you know, we require third-party agencies to we require manufacturers to submit plans that have already been approved by a third-party agency, although we backed off of that a little bit for certified manufacturers. Certified manufacturers can currently do direct plan submittals to the agency, and the department will take a look at those. So we are going to look at going straight to that. This ties in with the last bullet also and what that audit process looks like. It may be fairly easy to move it in stages also, so we'll try to figure out what those stages look like as we get more comfortable with the third-party agencies having the final approval. We ran numbers last year, and it looked like about 16% of the plans that came into the department for after they had already been reviewed by a third-party agency had to be sent back. And the primary purpose was site-specific concerns, jurisdictional design criteria. That was the biggest piece of that. We do not have a breakout of what came from certified factories versus non-certified, just registered factories. So that's a kind of an unknown. And as we move to regional building codes with regional design criteria and a table with the exact design criteria for all X number of regions, we hope that submittal rate, resubmittal rate will go down. Does that make sense to everybody? Mo, I see you shaking your head up and down, but that's kind of my understanding of that one. Nate.
I think my only comment as we kind of get into that I want to guard against is setting up a system that has numerical review standards, meaning, if a third party goes over 16% or whatever that, looks like, because if anybody that does plan review wants to, chime in here, I can take a Division of Housing approved plan set and find 3 things wrong with every single one of them. And just like if somebody looks hard enough at a third party reviewed set, they can also find 3 things wrong with it. There's never a perfectly reviewed set of prints out there. And so we're gonna have to be really careful about how we review the third party people, because it can't just be like, oh, we found something wrong, they're doing a bad job, which is kind of the narrative that typically comes out, because that shoe can be flipped really quickly if we ask them to review Division of Housing approved plan sets. And so I don't know how we're going to measure them. They do need to be measured, but it has to be with some subjectivity and not hard measurements. So anyway, that's just we'll get to that later. But
yeah, Nate,
those important comments, Nate. But one has to also remember liability. At the end of the day, the state is ultimately liable if something goes wrong.
Agreed.
Of course, we're going to work back downstream. Right?
I might challenge that,
and
Mo.
engage the others who did something incorrect, right? But ultimately, it's the state that's signing off on these things, and so the state is ultimate liability. But you raise an excellent point that we have to find the appropriate balance here. So it will require some serious conversation about how to strike that balance. But we want to make sure it's not also rubber stamp either on the other end of the spectrum, right?
Dean has an architect's stamp point of view.
Yeah, I think of everybody in the group, only the designers have ever been pulled into an actual claim with respect to problems with plans. So where liability flows has very practical and tactical direction directly to the folks who are doing the work. But in my book, it always comes down to, look, if the state were to hire Joe, who happens to be a third-party inspector to work for the state, would the plans review not go exactly the same way, whether he worked for the state or whether he worked as a third party? I think there just needs to be a set of best practices and standards of care, just like there is with everything else, and then complete authority handed off to whoever's taking on that objective. That this whole business of having a third-party inspection or a third-party plans review and then a state plans review is just absolute nonsense. I think any factory would agree
The design community would absolutely agree. It takes time, it creates risk, and we just need to, you know, lay down what are the certification requirements and best practices, and then put 100% of the autonomy onto that party, whether it's the state or a third party reviewer. Just stick to the guns and go with it. Because to Nate's point, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect set of plans. It doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Which is why this was put in the statute, right, to allow for that option. And Mike had a great point in the chat here. Other states are already doing this, so we can learn from those other states as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
Right. I agree with that. And Mike, thanks for those comments in the chat. Don?
I think this is something that needs to maybe focus more detail on the qualifications of people doing the plan reviews. Not going to throw anyone under the bus, but I've seen things that weren't even close to being code that have come through all kinds of parties and got caught at the local level. So if it's how to include local jurisdictions, allow them to do the reviews, work together with them, I think that's critical, because your local jurisdictions are going to review the plans regardless, and they're going to bring comments back. And, you know, I think it starts out, you know, whatever direction we go, is making sure the plan review staff is qualified to review, you know, and I'm talking more commercial, but mechanical, plumbing, electrical. You know, I think there's a way to streamline it. I agree with Dean, but I think what we really got to look at is the qualifications of people doing the plan reviews.
Thank you, Don. Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's the end of the big stuff. And as you notice from the conversations we just had, it's going to take a lot of conversations and a lot of diving into the details on this to document what it is we want to do before we can even draft administrative rules for this. So it'll be a process. We're not only going to get input from this group, but we'll also have stakeholder meetings as we get closer to the development of the comprehensive rules that'll go to the industry and all the local stakeholders on what those administrative rules look like. We'll get comments and feedback before it goes to the State Housing Board for approval. All right, so Mo, I may need your help on this one, because this is a little interesting piece in statute that we're trying to untangle, and that's effective when a notice specified effective date is sent after adoption of the rules to the revisor of statutes. So do you want to walk through the gist of this, Mo, or do you want me to just go off the slides?
Well, it's really just logistical stuff. It's not really anything that's important. The first one is, well, what it is this becomes effective. It's a weird thing that the drafter put in the bill at the end of the session, that these parts go into effect after DOLA. Well, in fact, it says the State Housing Board, and the State Housing Board is not going to send the notice. It's really going to be DOLA, Division of Housing, on behalf of the State Housing Board, I guess, sends a notice to this reviser of statutes that the rulemaking has concluded, and then when the effective date will be, and when we would like to see these pieces go into effect. Obviously, we want them to be timed the same. So if the rules go into effect June 30th or July 1st, that's what we're going to say. And then really, the first one is, you know, clarification in the statute that, and I don't know why the timing of this was made to be July 1st, probably because the regional codes will go into place then or by then. And really what it's stating is any alteration to the structures, right, that are certified by us, is local control, right? Not sure why that has an effective date of later. technically that's how it works today, right? If we've signed off on the construction of a factory built structure and its installation, and something happens a year later to that structure, that's outside of our jurisdiction anyway. So I don't know why this part was done this way, but that's in essence what it means. And then the other parts are really just cleanup language. 3310 and 3318 are really requirements in statute that talk about wind and snow load requirements and fire wildfire risk being under local control, right? While the rest of the structure and its installation is under the statewide program through DOLA. Well, since we're going to go away from that model effective July 1st or by July 1st, then the rest of those pieces of statute need to be removed and repealed to be consistent with the new model when we have the regional codes go in effect. So that's in essence what this is doing. I wouldn't get too bogged down in it. It's not anything that impacts what we're going to be implementing, but it's just something to be aware of. These moving parts, how they fit together, if you will.
Thank you, Mo. And I think that the approach we'll take on this is we'll pull up those specific sections of statute and go through them in like 3310 and 3318 just to make sure that everybody understands that. So, all right. So non-administrative rule changes. This is where we want to factor in a couple of other things. One, for certain jurisdictions that are affected by HB 25-1273, which is the single exits in certain multifamily structures. This just levels the playing field. On-site developers are going to be able to do single exits if they meet all the criteria that are laid out in the bill. There's about 2 pages of criteria, and we want to make sure that factory built structures have that same option. So we will write a rule, administrative rule for that. Basically, the administrative rule will be an amendment to the IBC. The next one is dealing with accessibility. That's HB 25-1030. This changed the accessibility requirements. It actually requires the state housing board to ensure adopted codes meet or exceed the accessibility standards of the 2 most recent IBCs. That would be 21 and 24 right now. I don't think 27 has been adopted yet. But once the 27 is adopted, then it'll be the 24 and 27 one. And then we must go to at least, so when they adopt 27, then we will have to also meet the 24 IBC accessibility standards. Now, there's also another whole section of Colorado statute that deals with accessibility, and that is 95102, which requires the design criteria must comply with the 2017 ICC ANSI ICE 117.1. And from my understanding, the 2023 draft of this document is also out now, available for comment. And I don't know what the implementation date of that 23 one would be available. They're 2 years behind because we're in 2025 right now. So they've not adopted it yet that I know of. But that is what we're going to try to do, is deconflict in a rule what the accessibility requirements are. Dean? You've got
I read
experience with this.
Read through this accessibility one and kept getting hung up on it in advance of today's meeting. So is it the meet or exceed the accessibility standards of both the 2 most recent or either of the 2 most recent IBC requirements?
Either of the 2 most recent is the way I read it, Dean.
Thank you. Huge distinction, obviously.
Yes.
And so my additional thoughts on that, accessibility has long been well known as the land for opportunistic attorneys because ANSI and the IBC and the ADA all have very well-known conflicts with each other. And so you actually making design decisions and executing construction on, to meet one code actually is mutually exclusive of meeting another. I would advocate in any way possible, and this isn't really specific to modular or offsite or anything, but advocate to provide some sort of safe harbor for an owner developer to say, hey, as long as my design team followed, this, that, or the other, then we're in a safe zone. Because if we follow this and we say, okay, we're going to follow one of the two most recent ICCs, so check the box off, we've done our job. Oopsie, there's a Title IX requirement in there that's not even listed in any of this. There's ANSI, and all of these codes are not constantly, but I mean, they're changing every 2 to 5 years, and they're not well coordinated at all. Enter in any kind of UFIS requirements for a HUD financed project, and now you've got a whole nother layer of stuff that doesn't actually necessarily see eye to eye with ICC, IBC, or ANSI. So it's a murky area for us as designers, certainly for factories to try and execute what they can have confidence on, and anybody in the field who's doing this to say, okay, well, here's our framework, but man, if we could lay out a safe harbor so that it could just eliminate any potential for future litigation because you went one route and it happened to be mutually exclusive with another set of codes.
Thank you, Dean. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, I've got maybe an update on your first question, Sam, on the 27 IBC. So the 27 IBC is getting ready to go to final action a year from now. And you're correct that the updated A117 is not 100% complete. It's very, very close. After talking to staff with ICC, Kim Parlberg, but it will be in place by the time the final action hearings for doing the full approval of the IBC. So when that gets published in January of 2027, I believe then at that point, it'll be updated to the latest version. And currently the 21 and 24 still reference the 2017 version. So I agree that the way that language reads, it's either or. So, we're under the 21 right now, aren't we? I think the state is. So you should be already enforcing the 2017, and when we go to the 24, it won't be a change other than, not until the 27. But to Dean's comment, I'd argue with some of the comments in that the A117 and the IBC I do plan reviews all the time on commercial, and they are very well in alignment for requirements. And the IBC is considered safe harbor based on not only the A117, but the ADA. Definitely in a lot of contact with ICC staff, Kim Parlberg, who's the expert there. But with that being said, from an adopted code with jurisdictions throughout the country and other parts of the country, that when you go to the IBC, it references the A117. So you don't adopt the A117 separately. It's adopted by reference, just like a lot of other standards. So I have not seen any issues. Now, I agree on the Title IX that the state legislation passed many years ago is outdated. The language in there is terrible because it references the 2009 A117. We haven't been enforcing it that way. But you'd still have to comply with that. And ADA, is a different ballgame because when you're doing a design, definitely designers need to keep ADA in mind, but there are differences between the ADA. I agree, but typically ADA issues are only adjudicated through after the fact. When a building has a certificate of occupancy, then people could take an ADA complaint through the Department of Justice, not local courts. But with all that being said, I mean, I've been involved in the code change process, in particular with the accessibility. But those are just some comments. I know we'll get into more detail, but I think with this legislation that passed, the 25-1030, the state's already in compliance and you're in good shape.
Yeah, Tim, we looked at it too, and Mo, I'll let you go ahead, and then I'll give my thoughts.
No, go ahead and say what you're going to say. I'll go after you.
Okay, so Donnie and I looked at 2530, 1030, and we looked at the 27, the 9-5-102, right, requirements. We believe we're in compliance right now with 251030. The concern comes a little bit when the 27 code is adopted, and we need to look if the 24 code only has the 2017 ICC standard in there, then we should be okay still. If the 23 is done and changes into an update of the 2024 code, then we have to look at compliance with 1030. So there's a couple what ifs. Dean, I certainly heard your concern with making sure it's very clear what we are going to require from the state. My other thought is I want to talk to my other state colleagues that have state building codes and about how they're implementing 1030, but they're generally just building on state land or not doing a lot of structures like we do. Mo?
Yeah, I haven't read 1030 yet. I need to do so. I'm surprised to hear that it does not amend 9.5 while it was addressing accessibility standards to update it. Is that accurate, Tim? It doesn't.
That is accurate. We made a recommendation during the legislative process that they try to align the two, and it was not accepted.
Agreed.
Well,
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Tom Myers, with the chapter.
All right, thank you. Real quick, sorry. I wasn't done. But thank you for bringing up Tom Meyer, because that was what I was going to go to next. Because Tom Meyer and a group of us met several years ago. Gosh, I want to say it was like 3 years ago. With myself and Greg Argery, one of our plan reviewers, met with over several meetings to update 9.5, and then there was a plan to run a bill, but that bill never got run, and none of that got introduced here. Is that what I'm hearing, Tim? Sorry.
That is correct. Somebody, I don't know if your team or Tom wasn't able to get a politician to kind of take that forward. It's unfortunate because we still have to enforce it, but we're enforcing outdated A117. Tom, I talk to Tom all the time, and it's unfortunate. It's just really outdated legislation, and
Right.
it's kind of hanging out there like a bad apple, I might say.
Right. So Tom and that group was not able to find it. It wasn't us. It wasn't our bill. We were just helping with technical advice on how to write it or amend it, I guess, the law. Okay, I'll reach out to Tom and talk to him about it. Thanks.
But I would point out that it's really primarily dealing with townhome projects. So it's not single family, it's not multifamily is a whole different ballgame because now you're into IBC requirements for type A, type B.
That's
so
correct.
in single
Yeah.
family. So just
Yeah,
to point that.
Yeah, that was always my understanding. It was for, the whole thing was intended for the loophole for townhomes.
Mark?
Yeah, just 2 cents here. I served on that TAC committee about 3 years ago on the accessibility. We made a bunch of changes and nothing ever got submitted.
Well, thank you for your work on that, Mark.
We went through it. We had an advocate, we had a full committee, and we made a bunch of changes, Tim, but it just never got submitted.
Well, it sounds like, yeah, Mark, I know, I was part of those meetings. They were very robust and there's many of them. It just sounds like they couldn't
Right.
find a sponsor is the problem. But just interesting
Right.
that we couldn't, when this bill got a sponsor, it's just surprising that couldn't then be dusted off and incorporated into this process. I'm sorry I missed that.
All right. A couple other non-administrative rule changes. One we've talked about here. If everybody wants to take a look at the new WUI code that's been adopted by the state, there's a hot link on this presentation to that. And the map. The map, I will tell you, is difficult to load on anything other than a supercomputer. Give it some time and make it regional. It's very hard to pull the entire statewide map up to get a visual of what it looks like across the state, but you can pull up sections of the state to look at what's in and out of the WUI. Right. And then so one of the things that we talked about earlier was maybe taking a look at adopting chapter 4 of the structure hardening requirements of that and the map that is on their website. Another one Donnie and I are working through is relocatable food service modulars. These are not food trucks. These are modular units being used for food service that are dropped in one location, then picked up and craned and moved to another location. Tim, you want to talk about the WUI? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just to tag on, just for clarification to the board, the map that was approved just recently by the state WUI board is not going to be the only map that a manufacturer or the state has to look at, because there are there are some jurisdictions that have their own map that is in place, and they have to take that through the board to get it approved as an approved alternate map in relation to the state map. So there's like Boulder County, a lot of the Front Range, probably up in the mountains too. Sam, you know, your team up all everywhere have their own maps. They have to go through a little exercise to get that approved. So if you, that's going to supersede the state map. So in my jurisdiction, we're looking at doing a new map. We're going to have to hire an outside agency to try to do that, because we have some areas in our community that we don't feel should be in the orange zone. But just to point that out, is it's not just that map in the state that you're going to have to really look, which is going to come into play with our discussion, I think, as we move through on a regional concept, which is what I talked about. But in terms of how to overlay or interface with the approved maps on the local jurisdictions.
Tim, do you know offhand whether the website, the WUI Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, will be providing these maps on their website too, as they're approved, or will it be integrated into the master map?
They will not be integrated, and I don't have the answer on how transparent that group will be. I do know that at the last public meeting, which was a week ago, last Friday, that the board voted to create a subcommittee of 3 voting members and 2 non-voting members. And those 3 voting members will be charged with reviewing a proposed alternate map. They don't have the people selected yet. We don't have timeframes. And this is all in relation to the rules of, you have beginning July 1st, a jurisdiction has 9 months to get that thing adopted. And they don't even have a subcommittee set up yet. It's been a frustrating, interesting process to follow the last 2 years with the WUI. But in any case, just really jurisdictions need to be paying attention to how that all, but I don't believe they're going to be putting up all the local maps.
Okay, and then are there any current local maps that are approved changes to the WUI map?
I think the way that language read in the WUI, that the ordinance or legislation, I'm sorry, said that an alternate map that is as restrictive or more restrictive, that type of language. And I thought that one of the last public meetings is that a jurisdiction would have to take that map that they already have. And I'm familiar with Jeffco, Boulder, those kind of Front Range, and just submit that to this board, subcommittee, I guess, and say, is this okay? And then they're going to rule on it, so to speak. I think that's how that subcommittee is going to work.
Well, we've got a DOLA rep on that Wildfire Resiliency Code team, so I think it's a non-voting member on that, so we can keep in touch on that through her. Mo?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we ask those questions ourselves, Sam, directly through our point of contact. But Tim also just clarified something I was going to clarify for you earlier. And that's this process doesn't sound like it's informally set up yet to actually approve these alternate maps. So there's nothing to display at this time, was what I'd gathered from what Tim had shared earlier. But Tim, and I need to read this again myself, but the actual, I gathered from what you also said that, unless I misunderstood, basically local jurisdictions have 9 months to get this alternate map produced and approved from July 1st of this year. It sounds like if they don't do that, then I assume the default is then they basically have accepted the state map. Is that correct?
That would be my assessment. Correct. That the state map will be the guardrail, or however you want to put that.
Default, if you will.
Default. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks, folks. More on that to come. As I started on this last bullet, and I'm being observant of time, I want to make sure we don't run over. Is that the other thing Donnie and I have been looking at is relocatable food service modules, and we'll work up some language on that maybe for the next presentation. I threw some stuff in here primarily for our new members with what Building Codes and Standards is responsible for and how we're organized a little bit. I think I'm going to take just a couple minutes and look through, flip through these, but this is in your slide deck that I sent out last night. If you have any questions on this, let us know. One of the things is Donnie is our program manager. We have plans review. Greg Ardrey is our engineer and our senior plans examiner. He takes care of this column over on the left-hand side. Yesenia and another program coordinator, TBD, take care of all the administrative, everything from communications, but primarily the registrations and renewals and the certifications of the different parties, manufacturers, installers, and sellers. And so they take care of that in addition to scheduling the inspection team. Robert Brand is our lead inspector. He takes care of 3 other inspectors that we keep them on the road quite a bit and traveling around all 4 corners of the state. Oh, and I forgot to mention up here, this blue box, that's the new term limited project manager that is being hired. I've already mentioned we do plan review, in-state inspections, both for factories, installation, and certification. We coordinate with the local jurisdictions on the who's doing what to when, whom, and where. Then I mentioned registrations. By statute, we have to register manufacturers, sellers, and installers. Then we have the compliance with the standards, and then complaints. We do get complaints. And we categorize those into 2 categories: installation problems and construction defects and deficiencies on the unit itself. So we work through those complaints. Different building structure types that we take care of. If you didn't know, we take care of the modular, we take care of the tiny homes as defined by the Colorado Revised Statute. These are not tiny home RVs. If anybody is confused about that, these are tiny homes that are built to the IRC. We do not regulate the RV industry. Of course, with the HUD code manufactured homes, I'm the state appointed authority for HUD code homes coming into the state of Colorado. We currently do not have a state factory producing HUD code homes, but we are ready for that if that comes our way. We are also based a lot on the trying to stay on top of the curve and in the industry, anything to do with closed panel or closed construction. We're starting to see kit homes come in on a flatbed that are closed construction. We're starting to see some different types of materials come in panels that are closed construction. The majority right now is building panels to open construction. They're running conduit up and down on the inside of the unit, and those are not within our jurisdiction. We want to, but anything that has closed panels, we are responsible for, and we have component insignias for those. And then I mentioned earlier areas of the state that don't have a building department. I think it was the tiny home bill that clarified that we are now responsible for foundations for residential modular HUD code and tiny homes. That's been a kind of a change that has gradually been accepted. You just can't go out and pour your own foundation anymore in Baca County. You've got to contact us to do approve the plans and then do the different pieces of the foundation inspection prior to arrival of the unit. And then anything that has to do with on-site built hotels, motels, and multifamily in areas of the state that don't have a building department. We do those, we send folks out for the inspections on those. Just some quotes on the statute. The statute changed. 25002 is what we've been talking about. 1242 was the big one before that. And then the Colorado Electric Ready and Energy Ready, that statute change affected us and moved us to the 2021 code set to adopt the 2021 IECC. And here's that resource page I talked about. There are hot links to the 002 statute. It's not really a hot link. Just search Colorado revised statute and go to 2432 3301. It's a drill down option. It works out real well. And then links to our building codes and standards website and our TAC website. Tim?
Yeah, sorry to keep bringing questions, but the new state energy code, the low carbon or low energy and low carbon code, or low energy and carbon code, I guess is the official term, will be officially produced on September 1st. I know there's some requirements in that legislation for when the state has to adopt, this group has to adopt that. So will that be part of this discussion or come up in like a year or two or something?
Well, in a couple of years, Tim, our statute actually says that we have to adopt it by 2030. So we are going to keep to that 2030 date. They did not revise our statute when they adopted. They adopted pretty earlier than I think anybody had thought that they would. But we're not going to be talking about that until we look probably a year and a half before 2030. So sometime early 28, we'll take a look at that.
Good deal. Thank you.
So next steps. We've spent the first couple meetings going over some background, right? And I think that's been valuable to get everybody at least on the same page. Some great questions and discussions from different stakeholder groups. Moving forward, we're going to be getting down into the details of some of this, and based on the notes today, this list may revise somewhat, or be the discussions we had today about things that are required deep dives will be factored into the next meeting. But I want to start exploring considerations on that regional code development. I don't want this one to get away from us. I want to talk about wind shear and where wind shear follows adopted code maps, and anything. I know there's certain regions that can go outside of the approved maps based on criteria that have been established. Same for snow load, right? There's some very high locations that have a greater snow load than you would expect from a snow load map for the country. Then I want to talk about thermal zone, wildfire risk, radon risk, and automatic fire sprinklers in that discussion. Keeping it to 10 codes with automatic fire sprinklers as an A or a B type of option may be the way to go. Radon risk, I need to understand more from the manufacturers on what they're doing in other locations to where they've adopted a statewide radon risk map, right? And I don't even know if we have a map, but we're going to start driving down to those wildfire risk we talked about a little bit. I think it's going to be wildfire risk based on the WUI, right? The WUI map, and how we're going to incorporate that. So that's the things I want to talk about next meeting. I also I'll run up timelines for rulemaking 1, which is what we just talked about with the installers and the other codes that we want to adopt. And then the timeline for rulemaking 2, the regional codes for the July 1, 2026 requirements. Mo?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I just wanted a couple of points I wanted to make for everybody. One is reiterating something Sam said earlier. Please, if you've got any good ideas or can point to others with good ideas who've already done some of this work as a place to start, fire away. Send them to Sam, not me. Send them all to Sam. Right? Inundate his inbox with as much good ideas as possible. As pointed out, the regional co-development is going to be the second, but it's going to be a huge part of what we do. So we do have to start the work earlier while we get the installer requirements done first, right? So it's not too early to get those ideas in about the regional codes to Sam and team, okay? The other thing is, and Sam mentioned we're hiring a project manager to help us with this. The bill did come with funding to help us in 2 ways. One is the project manager. We've already started the hiring process. We're actually scheduling interviews next week, which is great. We got a bunch of candidates for that position, so very excited about that. But the other piece is, and I do need to check to make sure we got the funding. I'll check with our CFO after this meeting to make sure that funding came in because it was supposed to come in around July 1st, which is the start of our new fiscal year. But the second part that's also funded through this bill is hiring a contractor to help us with the actual code exercise. And I know Mark Lindsay has been reaching out to potential folks on our behalf to see who would be interested to help out with that exercise. But if others on this call are aware of anyone who would be well suited for that type of work, whether it's an entity or an individual, or may know of others who may know somebody suited for that type of work, we would love to have a conversation about that as well. Because it would really be helpful to have somebody with code expertise who's got the time and capacity to, figure out where all the local governments that are currently at, go through what this TAC might be recommending or have ideas of their own of how to compartmentalize them in an effective way, right? Please reach out with any suggestions there as well. So those are the 3 points. Getting your ideas as soon as possible. It's never too soon. And then, of course, if you've got ideas on individuals and entities that can help with the regional code work, please direct them to us as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mo. Any questions on these next steps? All right, next meeting's July 23rd. Not sure why I marked that one out. I should have only marked out the July 9th one, but the next meeting will be July 23rd. Don't look at that slide. It is already on you guys' schedule, I think. And with that, I'll just ask if there's any closing comments or concerns or questions before we adjourn.
Good question about the position or the entity that we're looking to help with the code work. I can get you language for that, Tim. In fact, we'll just shoot out to all of you guys to help get the creative juices flowing about the potential contacts there. Thank you.
Yeah, and the time commitment, everything, because when you approach somebody, they want to know what does it imply and, want to make sure that we have as much as information. Because I work with a lot of contractors, but that would be the couple questions for them.
Yeah, time frame
Right,
would be
okay.
easy. That's basically as soon as we get the money, right? And until the regional codes are done. So we're talking about sometime from now until March 31st, when we need to have the regional codes done by in order to make our rulemaking timeline to have them in effect by July 1st. So what is that? Now is that 9 months, right? Basically max work, 9 months work.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to stop my slide share. I'm going to thank you all for your time today. I truly appreciate it, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. We'll get this posting, this recording posted along with the slide deck to the website as soon as possible. So I am now going to stop the recording